like I said, my name's Barry, Vice President of Trade Relations from Carroll. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in just a bit, but also I want to introduce Maddie, Madison Kramer. She's our Wine and Spirits Education Manager. She's been with our company for
2.5
years.
Yeah.
And she was just promoted recently to the management position overseeing our education department. And I have been very blessed, very fortunate to work with this amazing company, this amazing family, just shy of 25 years. And I was very young. But you know, to see where it is today is just absolutely amazing. You know, when I first started with the company, we had two brands. We had Sutter Home, and we had a brand called Soleil. I've never heard of Soleil before. But very, very small. We actually had a food division. Because Bob Trincaro loves pasta, and he wanted to have pasta sauces. So we had varietal pasta sauces. We had white Zinfandel pasta sauce, we had Zinfandel, Cabernet, Chardonnay, and that's a tough business to be in. We know a lot about the wine business, the food business, not so much. So that was a long, long time ago. But anyway, the history, before we get into, and Marlene is right, y'all are going to learn a lot today. Within a short period of time, we can give you a little taste and actually a little smell of what we do in our education department. We have a very large education, one of the largest education departments in the industry. Very proud of it. We had the opportunity to build an education department. But before we talk about this seminar in particular, the story of the Trincaro family. And like I said, I've been working with this family for a long period of time, and I've had the opportunity to represent the company and the family all over the world, actually, and travel all over the world, representing all over the country, but still quite a bit of travel. And so I've told the story of the Trincaros, I can't even tell you, maybe 1,000 times, no exaggeration, and it still gives me goosebumps to tell the story of this amazing company, this amazing family. And so I know you know some of this already. The Trincaros, of course, originally from Italy, from the Asti region of Italy. And in 1920, Mario and Mary, of course, made their way to New York. Now, in 1920, Mario became a bartender. That's what he kind of knew, of course. And of course, he didn't have a job when he first came to the United States. So he became a bartender in 1920 in New York. What's kind of wrong with that picture? 1920, anybody? First year of Prohibition. So he's a bartender in Speakeasies of New York. He also worked at the Barbizon Hotel, I think, a very exclusive hotel after Prohibition. And they made a modest living. And they started to raise a family. They had 3 children. They had Bob, followed by Vera, and then Roger. Now fast forward to the 1940s. In the 1940s, Mario's older brother, John Trincaro, he was a wine broker. He worked for a wine company in New Jersey. So what he would do, you have to understand, all the European immigrants coming in, they're looking for wine. There's no wine to be done in the United States, except for out here in California. So what John did, Mario's older brother, he would come out to California, buy bulk wine, ship it back to the East Coast. But one of those trips, he came out to find bulk wine. He found Napa Valley. Heard about Napa Valley? Napa Valley. Everybody's been in Napa Valley before, right? Okay. Well, like myself, you detect a little bit of an accent. We're originally from New Orleans. We were raised in New Orleans. Was in the hotel business, transferred to 1999 to California, fell in love with Napa Valley. Been there ever since, about 30 years now in Napa Valley total. And so, like myself and so many people, to visit any wine region, really, try any winery is not a beautiful place. They're all beautiful places. So John fell in love with Napa Valley. Called his brother Mario, still living in New York with his family. He said, Mario, I have an idea. He said, let's go into business together. I found this old rundown, beat-up winery. We can get it really cheap. Let's go into business. I know a little bit about winemaking. You can handle the business aspects of the operation. He said, let's go into business together. He said, found this old place. We can buy it really cheap. So with the combined life savings of $12,000, and there's a lot of money back in those days. The combined life savings of $12,000 is everything they had. They had that dream. They bought one of the oldest wineries in Napa Valley. Still to this day, that winery is called Sutter Home. Now, when Mario and Mary, y'all have seen the Sutter Home property, of course. The beautiful Sutter Home Victoria, the iconic Sutter Home Victoria, one of the gems of Napa Valley. In fact, the same person who built that, the designer and contractor who built that Victorian, that beautiful, iconic Sutter Home Victoria, it's the same one that built the Beringer Rhine House, the Schramm House, where Schrammsburg is located. So it's one of the gems of Napa, and Spring Mountain, the mansion at Spring Mountain, the winery as well. So when Mario and Mary pulled up in front of that property, Mary, of course, looked right at the house. She was, oh my God, we can live in that beautiful house. Mario looked at his wife and he said, no, he says, I'm sorry. He said, we couldn't afford to buy that Victorian house. The owners had to divide the property. We're going to live on the left-hand side in that old farmhouse. Well, when I say the Trinqueros were dirt poor when they moved out to California, literally they were dirt poor. Now that old farmhouse is a vacant lot now. But I'll elaborate a little bit more on that story in a little bit. But part of that farmhouse had dirt floors. They didn't have indoor plumbing. They had an outhouse when they first moved out here. They struggled for many years. Now fast forward to the 1940s. In the 1940s, Bob, the eldest son of Mario and Mary, came to his father Mario and said, Daddy, he says, I just got out of the military, served in the Air Force in the 1950s. He said, I need a job. He said, I just got married to, they're still married to this day. Bob and Evelyn are still married to this day. And he said, I just got married. We just got married. I want to raise a family. He said, I need a job. Can I work here with the family? Can I work here at the winery? And Mario looked at his eldest son, Bob. He said, Bobby, and I remember, Bob, tell the story. I've heard Bob tell this exact story. And he said, Bobby, he said, we really can't afford you. He said, but we can give you a part-time job. Help your Uncle John, make the wine. He's getting up in age, and everything's done by hand back in those days. Of course, it was a lot of work. So help your Uncle John make the wine. So Bob, the eldest son of Mario and Mary, became the part-time winemaker in Summer Home for the family, helping his Uncle John. But Mario said, most importantly, Bobby, he said, just until you find something more meaningful, there's no future in the wine business whatsoever. Imagine that. So, Bob was a part-time winemaker. He helped his Uncle John make the wine. Now, Bob never went to winemaking school, never went to college. I mean, he got out of the military and started working with the family. So he learned all this winemaking experience really from his Uncle John, and he started taking classes. He go to Davis and take some classes here and there, and learned there's a lot of camaraderie still today. It really in the wine business overall, there's a lot of camaraderie in our industry. It really is, especially in Napa Valley, especially in those days. And like Louis Martini would help him, and there's a lot of camaraderie. So anyway, Bob learned all this winemaking hands-on. Now Bob became a full-time winemaker in 1961. Uncle John decided to retire. He says, don't get too old for this. So Bob had a full-time job in 1961. So Bob always loved Zinfandel. I know you know some bits and pieces of this story. Bob always loved Zinfandel. He loved working with the Zinfandel grape, and he loved the Zinfandel wine. He wanted to do something he'd never been done before. That was to make a reserve-style wine using Zinfandel as opposed to Cabernet Sauvignon. Now, Cabernet Sauvignon, we know that. Most playing wine grape in the world. Most playing wine grape in Napa Valley. Most highly revered wine grapes in the world is Cabernet Sauvignon. And Cabernet Sauvignon does amazing in Napa Valley, as we know. So a lot of the winemakers were actually, because you have to understand, I mean, it's where the business is. Cabernet Sauvignon commands a high price. So winemakers and growers were actually pulling out these old Zinfandel vines and planting over the Cabernet. So Bob said, you know what? He said, I like Cabernet, but he said, I want to do something special with Zinfandel. Nobody's paying enough attention to Zinfandel. So in 1968, Bob produced a reserved Zinfandel. Took Bordelaise techniques, if you were applying to Cabernet, he applied them to Zinfandel. Nobody had really done that before. They weren't paying attention to Zinfandel. They were on the Cabernet train, and for good reason. So, and now, a little trivia question. Where did those grapes come from? Back in those days, Sutter Home reserved Zinfandel. They didn't come from Napa Valley. Where did they come from? Anybody know? Amador. They came from Amador. They came from a place, now, there's so many stories walking all over the place here, but I'm trying not to. I'm trying to stay focused. There's this gentleman, his name's Darrell Cordy. You ever heard of Cordy Brothers in Sacramento? But Darrell Cordy and Bob Trinquero are still very dear friends to this day. They're the same age. They're in their early 80s now. And Darrell said, Bob, if you want to make Zinfandel, he says, I know how much you like Zinfandel. You've got to go to this place called the Diva Ranch. It's in Amador County, of course. He says, I know the Diva family go there and buy these incredible, some of these vines are planted when Abraham Lincoln was president. Has anybody been to the Diva Ranch? Has anybody seen these? Now, for me, like a wine extremist nerd that I am, to go into the Diva Ranch and see these Zinfandel vines, they stand about this high. The trunks on them are like this. And the root system, as we know, the topsoil is very shallow in Amador County. So the roots, you see this gorgeous, beautiful, ancient vine, the arms are reaching up these branches like that, and the roots go in and out of the soil. They wade in and out of the soil. And if you're lucky enough to be able to go into this thing, you can't wear any shoes. They're very specially treated boots. Because, why? I know. Because they're on their own rootstock, so phylloxera, to bring phylloxera to the vineyard. So this is a sacred, special area. So when I met Ken Deaver for the first time, guy's just literally larger than life, huge guy. I always wears overalls and hat. And I was walking out to Diva Ranch, and this goes back over 20 years now. And I was going through the vineyard and I said, Ken, I said, we must have a real stringent contract with you. I mean, we've been buying grapes since 1968 from you. Every year since 1968, we still buy grapes for, of course, our Terra de Oro wines, our Diva single vineyard Zinfandel. I said, well, we must have a long contract with you. He said, contract? He says, I shook Bob Trinchero's hand in 1968. That's our contract. So, Bob found these very sacred, incredible Zinfandel grapes. He brought it back to the winery, back to Sutter Home in 1968, and he made his first Sutter Home Reserve Zinfandel. Now, when he released that wine, release, we say release nowadays, you know what that means? Goes through marketing programs, goes through points of distribution, goes in, that's a release nowadays. Release back in those days, open the front door of the winery. All the wine was sold out the front door of the winery. As a matter of fact, there's another story. So many other stories I can go down, probably even know she's heard most of them. And but most of the wine sold back in those days wasn't sold in bottles. It was sold in jugs out the front door of the winery. And this is a joke. It's actually true. It's funny. They only had 2 tanks in the back. The Trincheros could only afford 2 tanks in the back. Okay, they had a red tank and they had a white tank. Okay, that's all they had. But they produced about 3 or 4 different red wines and about 3 or 4 different white wines. So, for example, most of the wine was sold to the local, to the tourists back in those days. So you could take a jug from your house, bring it to Sutter Home Winery. Maybe Mario or Mary would be back there. Somebody would come in with their jug they brought from home. I'd like some Cabernet Sauvignon. Oh, no problem at all. Take the jug out of the hand, go in the back, go to the red tank, fill it up with red wine. Now, by law, it had to have a label before it walked out the building. When I started working for this family, back in the warehouse behind the tasting room, that's a rhythm structure built in the 1870s. So they have warehouse, still to this day, a warehouse back there. When my office was on that side of the street back in those days, I was walking around the property. It had pallets in the back. The Trincheros, and I'll talk about that in a second, they threw nothing away. Wasted nothing, threw nothing away. They kept everything. And they were a poor family, they had to. In the back, on those pallets, they had old cigar boxes and shoe boxes with all their labels and all kind of stuff, all their records. It's still back there. So they would go into their cigar box or shoe box, old shoebox, get a Cabernet Sauvignon label, because this person wanted Cabernet, filled it up with red wine, slap a Cabernet label on it, out the door it went. Next person who walked in, oh, I'd like some Merlot. Oh, no problem. Go to the red tank, fill it up with red wine, get a Merlot label, out the door it went. Times have changed quite a bit, haven't they? So, when Bob released his vintage 1968 Sutter Home Reserve Zinfandel, by some chance, by some lucky chance, I'll explain that, how we feel about that as well. By some lucky chance, a wine writer in San Francisco got their hands on a bottle of this Sutter Home vintage 1968 Reserve Zinfandel. Very small production, of course, very artisan style of wine, truly handcrafted. They wrote an incredible review on it. That's probably in the Chronicle or whatever. Wrote, wow, we didn't know Zinfandel could be this good. It's an amazing bottle of wine. Well, Bob Trinchero was getting calls from Michelin star type restaurants in San Francisco. Wow, you just got this incredible review on this wine. We don't have a Zinfandel. We've never heard of a Zinfandel like this before. How can we get your wine on our list? Bob Trinchero said, well, he said, I sell all the wine out of the front door of my winery. I don't make a lot of this wine, but if you want my wine, Mr. Michelin star restaurant in San Francisco, I'm going to get it to you. Bob Trinchero would get to his 1962 Chrysler Newport. Some of y'all who know about cars know about these old Chryslers. He still has his car. Still has it. It's parked behind the Sutter Home tasting room. It's completely restored. And it's an awesome car. It's really, have you seen it yet?
Yeah.
You see that? It's awesome. So anyway, Bob Trinchero would get into his 1962 Chrysler Newport, this old land yacht Chrysler, put Sutter Home wine in the trunk of that car, Sutter Home Zinfandel, drive down to San Francisco, sell wine out of the trunk of his car to the Michelin star type restaurants in San Francisco. Now we can kind of look back and snicker today, but Sutter Home Zinfandel is being what we consider a cult wine today. Very small production, artisan. So Bob knew he had something special. Okay? And he said, you know what? He says, I got this small following, this strong following. He says, I'm going to keep on making this wine. Now, in 1972,
Now you have to understand, he's learning things as he's going along here. 1972, he heard about a process called saunier, very commonly used process to make a red wine. Y'all probably know about this. Some of y'all probably know, if not all of y'all. It's just simply to remove some of the free run juice. In French, it means to bleed. Bordelais technique. They use it in Bordeaux still today, of course, and very common when you're making reserve style of red wine. So if you pull away some of the juice before you start the maceration and fermentation, what are you doing? Because all the color, flavor, structure, complexity, everything makes a red wine comes from the skins. So if you remove some of that juice, what are you doing? You're concentrating. Everything makes a red wine. Now, you just pull maybe 10% of the juice away. A little bit, okay? 10% of the juice away, just brush by the skins. You can call it a byproduct of the way he's making this style of red wine. You just brush by the skins. Now, of course, grape juice, just about all the grapes in the world have clear juice, like Zinfandel, Cabernet Sauvignon. You squeeze it, the juice looks clear. So just pulled it away, just brushed by the skins. Wasn't white, certainly wasn't red, had a light pinkish tinge. It was almost white, had a light, very light pinkish tinge to it. He just put it off to the side. Now, his father Mario said, "We waste nothing, we throw nothing away. We're too poor to throw anything away. Everything has value. I don't care what it is." Now, at this point in time, it's not the last time I'm going to say this. Start putting this in perspective, okay? This is in the 1970s. This is the mid-1970s. It's not that long ago, y'all. It's really, for me, it's not very long at all. But it's not about 40-something years ago, okay? 40 years ago, give or take, of course. And this family, when Roger served in Vietnam, he's the only one who went to college. He went to USC. And on the weekends, he would actually help the family. He'd get the family pickup truck every Sunday, or just about every Sunday, go to the other large winery tasting rooms like Mondavi, Behringer. Roger Trinchero, in the mid-1970s, would go into their dumpsters at Mondavi, Behringer, the larger winery tasting room, get bottles they were throwing out as trash, to bring them back to Sutter Home to wash bottles, because they couldn't afford to buy bottles to bottle the wines that they were making, and they didn't throw anything away. And so Mario told his family, "Waste nothing. I don't care what color the color the juice is. Grape juice, potential wine, potential money. I don't care. Make a wine out of it. I don't care how little amount it is." So Bob had to make a wine out of this pale pink runoff Zinfandel juice. Does anybody not see what that story's in? Okay? Beginning what we now know is Sutter Home White Zinfandel. Now, what people don't realize is the man who created White Zinfandel, Sutter Home White Zinfandel, slightly sweeter style of wine, introduced my generation more to the world of wine, does not care for sweet wines. Not care for sweet wines. You can respect and appreciate them, but he doesn't care for them. The first two vintages, what we now know as Sutter Home White Zinfandel, was made in a bone-dry rosé, reminiscent of the great bone-dry rosés of southern France. He actually gave it a French name. He didn't even call it White Zinfandel. Does anybody know what he called it? Œil de Pétri, the eye of the partridge. Œil de Pétri. Because he made it in homage to the great dry rosés of southern France. So when he put that label, and his sister Vera had beautiful penmanship. In fact, Vera never owned a computer. She would write everything by hand or a typewriter. And so beautiful penmanship. Œil de Pétri, label is submitted into the BATF for government approval. They came back to Bob and said, "Bob, something comes from France, comes from the United States. You can call it anything you want, but you have to have an English language descriptor on the front label to describe what's in the bottle." You have to understand, he's only making this because Daddy won't let him throw away the juice. It's like, oh, this is juice. All right, it's Zinfandel. I can't just call it Zinfandel because that's a red wine, red wine. Pink, it's almost white. White Zinfandel has a nicer green to it. So the first two vintages that we now know as Sutter Home White Zinfandel was Œil de Pétri, and in small print underneath, a White Zinfandel wine. Now fast forward to 1974. 1974, Bob Trinchero was making his Sutter Home White Zinfandel, but this time he dropped Œil de Pétri because people couldn't pronounce it, or just called it White Zin anyway. So, in 1974, now it's still, you understand, it's still a byproduct of his red wine. That's what he's really concentrated on. But his dad didn't want to throw away the juice. So he makes his Sutter Home White Zinfandel. It suffered a stuck fermentation. Now, y'all probably know this part of the story, but suffered a stuck fermentation can naturally happen, especially in an environment such as that back in those days. So for some reason, the yeast just stopped at some point. Just stopped. He tried to restart the fermentation to get the rosé all the way to dryness like he did the prior 2 years. He couldn't do it. He said, "You know what? Who cares? He said, I'm not even concentrating on this wine, I'm concentrating on the red wine. And so it'll be slightly sweeter this year. Who cares? So he filtered out the yeast, he put it in a bottle, and now, really unknown to him, he had a beautiful wine. It was balanced, beautifully balanced, a little bit of Brazil with sugar. It was off dry, really, it was off dry. So slightly sweet, beautifully balanced, with fresh fruity flavors that no one had ever seen before in the United States. Now, once again, I want you to put it in perspective. Okay, really stop and think about this. White Zinfandel, just a small amount of white Zinfandel being made. It's literally a byproduct of the way he's making his red wine. Put it in the tasting room. As we now know white Zinfandel today, the flavor profile is really still the same. It really is. I mean, for the most part, it is. He put it in the tasting room. Okay? Stop and think about this. People would come from all over the country, like they still do. They go to Napa Valley, in all wine countries, of course. They go to the Sutter Home tasting room, maybe for the first time. They taste the wines. They taste Sutter Home White Zinfandel for the very first time. Maybe Mario or Mary or Bob or Vera was back there, just pouring and taking money and putting it in the cigar box. In fact, if they made $100 in one day, that was a big day. It was a huge day. And Mario would make perfect martinis. He loved it. That's why we make it vermouth now. That's the original. Y'all probably know it's the original recipe. We're making the Trincari vermouth now. So, people would come to the Sutter Home tasting room, taste Sutter Home White Zinfandel for the very first time. Now, we just celebrated our 70th anniversary. I remember we celebrated our 50th anniversary. Bob Trincaro, we emptied out the INF warehouse. We had a huge celebration in there. And Mary was still alive back in those days, and she was there at the celebration as well, her mother. And I remember Bob got in front of everybody, in front of this huge warehouse. In fact, it was televised to certain areas of the country as well, to our distributors. It was a big, huge celebration, of course. And Bob Trincaro, he still says this to this day. Bob and Roger still say it. He got in front of everybody and says, I can't believe this happened to us. I really, honestly cannot believe this happened to us. He says, I can look back many years ago, and he told the story at that event. He said, I was sitting in my office above the tasting room. That's where we did everything. We practically lived up there. He says, the office rang, I was sitting at my desk, and the phone rang, and it was a young lady, and she said she worked with Southern Wine and Spirits in Miami, Florida. And she said, we have some big buyers, grocery stores like Kroger and stuff like that. They're asking about this Sutter Home White Zinfandel. Their customers are coming out to Napa Valley, they're tasting it, then they're coming to the grocery stores, they can't find it anywhere. And we're getting people asking for this Sutter Home White Zinfandel. Do you have a broker in Florida? And he said, lady, I'm selling wine out of the trunk of my car. He said, I don't have a broker anywhere. In fact, Bob said, I honestly thought Louis Martini was playing a joke on me. They used to play jokes on each other. He says, did Louis put you up to this? She says, no, who's Louis? She says, no, this is, no. So, Bob Trincaro was getting calls from all over the country. All over the country. People coming out to Napa Valley, tasting Sutter Home White Zinfandel for the very first time. Now we're one of the largest and most successful wine companies in the world. One of the most successful wine families in the history of wine in the world. It's just truly amazing when you stop and think about it. And if you ask the Trincaros, I've been to many events, I've been very fortunate over many years. If you ask the Trincaros, and I've heard people ask them this, of course they ask, what's the secret to your success? And they'll say, quote, I've heard Bob, Roger, and Vera say this. The secret to our success? We surround ourselves with great people. That's the secret to our success. Bob always he's got a great sense of humor. He says, Bob said, you know what? He says, we've gotten so big, I wouldn't even hire me. And they're so humble. Now, if you ask me that question, and I think I can speak for everybody in this room. I know I can speak for Maddie. I can speak for everybody I know of this company. If you ask us that question, what's the secret to the Trincaro success? You know what we say? I know what I said without hesitation. Great things happen to great people. Because they are absolutely amazing, wonderful, incredible people. And I'll tell you two more stories really quick. And they're personal to me. This family is so special to so many people. And but it was about 20-something years ago. And my office was at the Victoria, Southern Home Victoria back in those days upstairs. And I walk into my office, and Bob loves doing this to me. Because he knows I'm an extreme wine nerd, and I love wine education and educating people. And he always puts me to the test. He'll ask me questions out of the blue. Even in the hallway, because his office is right around mine in the admin building. And I'll see him in the hallway. He goes, Barry, tell me, what are the grapes of Bordeaux again? Or something. He loves asking that kind of stuff. He loves to talk. He really does. Matter of fact, if you ever go to Bob's office for something you need from Bob, you just a question, it only takes 5 minutes. You got to make sure you at least have 45 minutes because he'll just start talking. It's but I walked into my office, it was over 20 plus years ago. I walked in my office, the phone's ringing, and I look at the phone, it's like Bob from Carroll. It's like, why is Bob calling? Why you calling me this early? Jeez, I just walked. So I pick up the phone. I said, good morning, Bob. He goes, Barry. I said, yes, sir. He said, you know anything about the wines of Umbria? Just out of the blue. You know anything about the wines of Umbria? What? Where were you? You mean Italy, Central Italy, Umbria? He said, yeah, Umbria. I said, I've actually been there. It's a beautiful place, you know, over in Torriettos. He said, yeah. I had no idea why I was asking this. He goes, I'm hosting a lunch today. Gentleman's from Umbria. He says, you want to host a lunch with me today? That has nothing to do with what I really want to tell you. Just kind of shows how comical Bob can be and how wonderful he is. But I said, Bob, it'd be an honor to host a lunch with you today. Of course, I'd love to host a lunch with you today. And he said, great. But somebody at that lunch asked Bob Trincaro a question I never thought of asking, never imagined to ask. Somebody at that lunch said, Bob, why did your family change the name of the winery back in the 1940s? You know, from Sutter Home to Trincaro. Because Sutter Home had been shut down since Prohibition. There was no brand loyalty to the name Sutter Home, no brand recognition of the name Sutter Home whatsoever. And Sutter is actually Swiss German, it's not even Italian. Why on earth would you keep that name Sutter Home? God, that's a pretty good question. I know some of you know the answer to that question. You do. Without hesitation, Bob said, you know, we were really poor back in those days. He said, you know, there was a large sign out front. We couldn't afford enough paint to paint over the sign. Put it in perspective again, please do. Sutter Home is a big statement. It's a huge statement. Sutter Home is America's wine. It's literally America's wine. Don't take my word for it. The Wine Spectator many years ago, honored Bob Trincaro with the brand Sutter Home as the man who introduced more people to the world of wine in our country than any name in the history of our country. Sutter Home is America's wine. It's literally the wine of the American dream. That's a big statement. There's a lot of great wine made in the United States. A lot of great wine. But Sutter Home is America's wine. The name Sutter Home is synonymous with America and wine because his family was too poor to buy enough paint to paint over a sign. Tell me that's not one of the best examples of American dream you can possibly imagine. And we work with this. Now, give me a hook. But really quick, I'm going to tell you another quick little story. Okay, when I first started working for the company, I was walking around the property at the Victorian behind the tasting room, and I was looking in the back, just walking around the property, and it's still there to this day. There's a little one-bedroom cottage, just a little small one-bedroom house. Now, so you got to be a security person who lives on site. You know, the garden's a historical landmark. It really is a very important part of wine history, American wine history. Must be a security person who lives on site to guard the property. Maybe somebody who tends to the grounds. So I asked the employees, I said, who lives in that little house behind the tasting room in the parking lot, in an asphalt parking lot way in the back? They said, oh, that's where Mary lives. I said, as in Mary Trincaro, the owner of the winery? Bob Roger Kerr's mother lives in the parking lot behind the tasting room? They said, oh yeah, that's what, did you understand? That's where she raised her family. She'll tell you that's where her heart is. She didn't want to live anywhere else. I said, you gotta be kidding me, she's a millionaire. I mean, she could buy the biggest house in Napa Valley if she wanted to, not even twice. Oh, no. She'll tell you, that's where her heart is. She actually cooks for her. She brings in food sometimes to us. You gotta be kidding me, Mary Trincaro? Oh, she loves to cook here. We still have stacks, I have copies of them. Stacks of our handwritten recipe cards from Italy. All of our recipes, I mean, probably over 100 or more. And they said, oh, you'll meet her one day. She's a wonderful lady. So about a week later, I walked through the tasting room when the staff arrived. I walked in. If y'all been there before, they had the French doors that open from the rose garden. So I walked in, saw all the mailboxes. They're still back there to this day on the side of the road. And I opened up the door, walked into the tasting room, and by chance, at the same time, a petite elderly lady, so about this high, and she walked into the back door of the tasting room. She had a robe on, kind of like a house coat kind of thing, tied, pink slippers and white socks. It's got to be Mary, else could be. So I knew she was maybe looking for a newspaper. So we have a chain link fence separating the front parking lot from the back parking lot. So the paperboy can't get to throw the newspaper in the back of her little cottage. So I went to the front door, opened the door, had a newspaper, and walked over and handed it to her, and introduced myself. And I said, Mary, is there anything you need? Anything I can get for you? And she loved to cook early in the morning. And she needed a bottle of red wine for one of her recipes. She had a beautiful Italian accent. She said, may I have a bottle of red wine? I said, yes, ma'am. So I got a bottle of Sutter Home, or whatever it is off the shelf. I handed it to her. She put it back on the counter. She reached into a big deep pocket, pulls out a little purse, snaps it open, pulls out 2 folded $1 bills. What's in there? Takes it on slowly and gently starts handing 2 folded $1 bills to me. I'm nervous. I'm meeting Mary for the first time. Trying to be nice, kind of a knee-jerk reaction, and I didn't know she was trying to tip me. Pay for wine. I had no idea. So, Mary, that's okay, Mary. That's okay. That's okay. You just sign it out. That's okay. Well, she looked at me. She lifted her hand and pointed her finger. Very stern Italian accent. She said, "You listen to me, young man. I pay for all my wine." Yes, ma'am. I took the $2 and put it in the register. And I asked Bob. I ran into Bob a few days after that. I said, "Bob, let me ask you a question." He said, "Sure, Barry." I said, "I bet your mom, she's a wonderful lady." I said, "I had the opportunity to speak with her a little bit, and she does realize how successful the company is, does she? Does she?" And he goes, "Oh, she tried to pay for a wine again, didn't she?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he says, "You know what? Just let her pay for the wine. She insists on paying for it. Let her pay for it." And she knows we've done well, and that's all she cares about. And she passed away in that house. She refused to leave that house. At the age of 89, she passed away in that house. So we say her heart is still there. Good story? We work for this company and this family. So it's amazing. So, let's see. Now, what we're going to do, as I mentioned before, Maddie and I have taken you through Wine 101. We do all kinds of seminars, everything you can possibly imagine in the world of wine and now in the world of spirits. We have one of the largest and most respected wine and spirits education program in the industry, right here at Trutero. We were given the opportunity to build this program many years ago. We actually offer official certification, professional certification. I'm the former president of the Society of Wine Educators. We're the largest wine education organization in the world, based in Washington, D.C. And on behalf of Trutero, of course, Maddie, she's getting more involved in it now, but we've helped probably 8,000 to 9,000 industry professionals get professional certification, whether it's at CSW, CWE, CSS. So official certification, we've had the opportunity to help many, many people. So we're going to do Wine 101 for you today. Right. So the reason why we do education, and education is so important in our industry, is because wine is still new to us, really, in the United States, when you think about it. You think about wine regions such as France and Bordeaux, and Burgundy, and places like that. Well, in the United States, wine is still a new thing to us. People still have to learn about it, and they have a hunger for it, especially professionals in the industry. And the reason why, and this is from Ron Weekend, a very dear friend of mine, master of wine, master sommelier. He lives in Muncie now, in Tokai. And he wrote this cartoon many, many years ago, but it's still relative. And kind of read it a little bit. But professionals in the industry have to meet and hopefully exceed the expectations of their customers. Our customers, our consumers, are learning more about wine. That's why the premium segment, the premium, the ultra premium, the higher, more expensive wines are still growing in popularity, tremendously growing in popularity, because people are learning more about wines. One of the most explosive areas of travel are visiting wine regions. So we're there to educate, make sure that people know, professionals know, to meet and exceed the expectations of their customers. Okay, I'm going to stop talking.
All right, take it from here. All right, so we've all enjoyed a nice bottle of wine, I hope, since we work for Trutero. But what exactly is in that glass of wine, right? Well, believe it or not, it's going to be 80 to 90% water, give or take. Well, initially, I guess, wine is usually just grapes, right? That's the only ingredient typically in a bottle of wine. But within that grape, there's a high percentage of water, so 80 to 90%. It's a lot. So much so that, think about it, in the Middle Ages, they didn't have access to clean drinking water. So what did they drink? A lot of wine and a lot of beer. Yeah, it was kind of an interesting sight to see. But regardless, so it's a good source of hydration. Besides that, of course, wine has alcohol in it, right? Anywhere, give or take, 10 to 15%. You can have some much lower, some even higher than that. But obviously, this is what's going to probably differentiate you going for a bottle of wine versus your bottle of Welch's grape juice. So we can all say that the alcohol is a nice little plus there. And finally, acid. So it sounds kind of intimidating, but all wine has acidity, and it's going to be a critical part of wine. So kind of going back at that. So alcohol, right? So alcohol, it's going to be the warmth or the heat. If you ever have a higher alcohol wine, and you swallow it, and you feel a little warmth in your chest, that is the alcohol, right? What would be an example of a high alcohol wine? Anybody? Anything? Have you guys ever had port before? Port? Yeah, it's a very high alcohol wine. The reason being is because they'll just literally add very critical part. You can see it's much smaller, anywhere from like 1/2 to 3/4% of the wine. But this is what's going to provide the structure to the wine and like the thirst quenching sensation as well. So you have a sip of the nice Sauvignon Blanc, and you immediately feel like your mouth is just watering. You just want to like you're going back for more. That's acidity, right? That's how you can just on and go back for more and more of any kind of beverage, things like lemonade or like a margarita, right? Critical component in a margarita is lime juice. Without lime juice, it's just going to be really flat. So that's what acidity is for. And acidity actually allows for longevity as well. So if you have acidity in the wine, these wines can last for a very long time. And that's how you can age wines for decades on end. So acidity is very critical as well. All right, now some other components in wine. Sugar. So true or false? Is there sugar in all wine? What do you guys think?
True.
Yeah, true? Okay, very nice. So exactly. So there is a little bit of residual sugar that is in all wine. And if a wine is considered dry, and many wines are considered dry, that means that there is no perceptible sugar. So when you taste it, it's not going to taste sweet. But of course, we know grapes have sugar in, when they come on into the winery, and it's the sugar that gets converted into alcohol. And only so much sugar can be converted into alcohol. So there's always going to be a little bit of residual sugar in the wine. You can obviously have more or less. That's up to the winemaker. Now, calories. How many calories do you guys think are in a glass of wine?
120.
Nice, that's pretty good. Yeah, about 100 to 140. So on the money right there. But very nice. We're typically located in the valley of St. Helena, and so we'll host people from all over the world. And people will always come. They're going to all these different wineries. They're going to these amazing restaurants, as you can probably imagine. And they're just like, man, we just keep eating and drinking. And my response is that calories don't count in Napa, so we live there, so it's kind of great, yeah. But I don't really think of calories. I like to think of it when I'm drinking wine. But there are carbohydrates, of course, thin in wine as well. So white wine, generally around 2 grams. Red is around 3 grams. But if the wine is going to be sweeter, if it has residual sugar, as you can probably imagine, it's going to be a little bit more.
Okay. Well, we experience wine in 3 ways: or sight, smell, and taste. The most important sense we have by far is our sense of smell. Because you can't even describe a wine. You can talk, or you can think about a wine, or appreciate a wine, without thinking about the aromas in wine. So the largest group of aromatic compounds in wines are called esters. And of course, esters, some of the fruits, vegetables, spices, herbs, volatile essences are carried by thousands of nerve endings to the brain. And we'll talk about this when we go back. We'll be doing we call it Mastering Wine Aromas and the Aroma Wheel of Fortune. We'll be doing that just a little bit. But we have these nerve endings right up here. And this is how we sense aromas. Now, when you have a wine in front of you, okay, what is it? You want to experience the aromas in the wine. What is the first thing you do? What is the very first thing you do? If you want to experience the aromas in the wine, what's the first thing you do? A lot of people say swirl. I said swirl for years. But you got to swirl one. You got to swirl wine. That's it's a great thing to do at parties. Walk around swirling wine. But it's not the first thing you do. The reason why is because there's all these different esters and aromas in these wines. Or esters are aromas, of course. And they're all not the same. So there's some delicate, even without swirling that wine, if you have a wine just sitting in the glass, do you think there's some delicate, very delicate, fragile aromas floating atop the surface of that wine? Yes. So if you pick up that wine glass and just start swirling it right away, it's going to happen. Those delicate aromas are gone. So that is extreme wine nerd kind of stuff. So what you want to do is the wine. It's one of the reasons why the wine glass is shaped the way it is. You want to take the surface of that wine, tilt the glass, get the surface of that wine as close to your nose as possible. Put your nose, try to get your nose in the glass if you can. That is, like I said, it's extreme stuff. And put your nose in there and gently sniff. Now, if you have a nose like mine, you have to be careful not to get wine in your nose. No, it's not a cool thing to do at parties. So, but the thing is, you want to gently sniff. Gently, and notice I say gently sniff. Because what you want to do is make sure those aromas go up into your nasal cavity and touch the olfactory epithelium, these little thousands of hair-like structures we have right here. So, you take a big inhale, these thousands of little hair-like structures, the more that esters touch those structures, the more you can experience the aromas in the wine. So you take a big inhale. What happens? It's like a hurricane. Goes right past. The esters go right past the olfactory epithelium, these little hair-like structure. What does a dog do? What does a dog do? What does a cat do? What does any animal do? They gently sniff. Gently sniff. So your goal is to have those aroma molecules gently go up into your nasal cavity. I'm going to tell you right now, you want to be alone at parties? Start talking like this. Don't do this at parties. Trust me. So you want to go up in your nasal cavity, gently lay on top of the olfactory epithelium. Okay? That's how you sense aromas. Now, once you get those delicate aromas, then you can swirl the glass. That's called volatilizing your esters. You want to volatilize your esters, and you swirl the glass. And you can actually do that at parties. Just don't tell people you're volatilizing your esters. They might call security. Don't do that. Space, I need to volatilize my esters. So, but aromas are very important. They're the most essential part, you know that, of experiencing wines. Okay. Winemaking, of course, y'all know this, been around since, since 5000 BCE. Wine is fermented grape juice. That's all it is, really. It's fermented grape juice. And wine will actually make itself. And any great winemaker will say, I just guide the wine in the right direction. Wine will make itself. And when you do that, and Mario Monticelli, that's a quote from Mario Monticelli, all I do is guide the wine in the right direction. And when you do that, you're respecting the place where it came from. There's a great saying in the world of wine. Good wine tastes like the grape, great wine tastes like the place. And it's really true. So it's just fermentation, yeast eating the natural sugars in grapes, of course, in grape juice, converting the sugar into alcohol. And post-fermentation, of course, you can age in oak barrels or not. Only about 10% of the world's wine actually sees an oak barrel. And then post-aging, of course, filtration, sediment, of course. Right. And I'll do this from the camera.
You can. All right, I'll take it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, camera.
Yeah, no. Yeah. So fermentation, right? So who works in production here? You guys? Okay, yes. You guys probably all know this. But what exactly happens in the tank, right? So we have grapes, and the grapes have sugar in them, right? Well, we want to get that sugar converted into alcohol, right? That's where wine is. So what we're going to do is we're going to typically add yeast. Not all wine is made from out of yeast. Sometimes there's indigenous yeast that's on the grapes, and that'll jumpstart the fermentation. But typically we'll add yeast, and then the yeast is going to eat the sugars and turn them into alcohol. All right? Now there's a couple other things that are also created. Throughout fermentation, you're also going to get CO2 and heat as well. So say you want a dry wine. We talked about this before. Dry wine means there's no perceptible sweetness on the palate. You're going to let all the yeast convert all of the sugar and turn it into alcohol. All right? But if you want a sweet wine, there's a couple things you can do. You can either help the fermentation by filtering off the yeast cells. That's like a white Zinfandel, right? So you still want that residual sugar. There's just a little bit in there. So they'll filter out the yeast cells right then and there. So that cannot continue to ferment the sugars to turn into more alcohol. Or you can let that ferment and then add in, like we said earlier, like a grape spirit or some kind of a spirit that's high in alcohol. That's going to kill off the yeast. So then in that case, we have extra sugar, residual sugar, and higher alcohol because we're literally adding like 40% alcohol to that. And a sparkling wine is created because you're able to trap that CO2. So there's CO2 that's created through fermentation, and sparkling wine is going to be able to keep the CO2 in the wine. Whether it's done in a pressurized tank, where they're able to keep the CO2 in there, sometimes it's done in the bottle itself. That's what they do with champagne. So that's a whole other seminar in and of itself. So that's fermentation. But at the end of the day, everything starts in the vineyard. All right? So you really can't make good wine from bad grapes at the end of the day. So this picture, I actually took that one up on the left there. That one is at our Cloud Nest vineyard. So that's in Napa Valley. That's up on top of Mount Peter. And it's a gorgeous property. One of the Trincheros actually lives up there. But our winemaker up at Trinchero Napa Valley, who's been at Trinchero Napa Valley? Okay, good. A lot of you guys have. So the winemaker up there, Barry mentioned his name earlier. His name is Mario Monticelli. So he'll be the first to say that, again, everything starts in the vineyard. By the time those grapes arrive at the winery, 75% of the job is done. And so he's out there all throughout the year to make sure these vines are looking good. And we have this whole team and our viticulturalists that are out there tending to these vines. And I don't know, what do you guys think an average winemaker, if he's out in the vineyard checking out the grapes, how many grapes do you think a winemaker should eat to see if the grapes are ready to come in or not. How many grapes do you think Mario Monticelli eats on a given day when he goes out to the vineyards? Throw it out there.
100.
100? That sounds like a lot, right? That sounds like a lot. So we have 6 vineyards that Mario's visiting. And he told me that on a given day, he'll eat about 700 grapes. Right? Yeah. So he's a pretty tiny guy, too. So I don't know. Maybe it's a good diet. I don't know. But regardless, think about that. That's 700 grapes. And yes, wine grapes are tasty. They're pretty small, but they're good. But what he's looking for there's a lot of different things. So he's going to try one of these grapes, and as he bites down on the seeds, he wants a nice crunch. He wants the seeds to look nice and black. He's tasting the skins, and if he chews on the skins, his mouth starts to dry out. That's the tannins. So we're going to learn about tannins here in a minute, but when you taste wine and your mouth starts to dry out for red wines, that comes from the skins. So there's a lot of things that we're looking at before we're bringing these grapes in, and a lot of different things that we're looking at before we're telling our harvesters to go out there. So same thing goes for, I like to kind of use the analogy with tomato sauce, right? So I was out of town last week, and it was really nice. My roommate took care of my garden out back, and I came home to a plethora of tomatoes. I have one bush that's just going crazy right now, and I have so many that I just have to do something with it, or else they're going to start going bad. So actually, this past Sunday, I decided to make tomato sauce, and it was great. I literally only added roasted tomatoes, I added olive oil, and salt and pepper, and it was amazing. I have having that for the last few meals. It's been great. I can tell you what, if I try making that tomato sauce in the wintertime, okay, I don't have tomatoes that are growing in my garden in the wintertime. I don't think any of us probably do. But I want to, the grocery store, buying tomatoes there that I don't even know where they came from, but they'll do. Well, I can tell you what, if I just use olive oil and salt and pepper, it's not going to be nearly as good. I'm probably going to beef it up with some tomato paste, maybe add a bunch of herbs and spices to try to beef it up a little bit. Same thing goes for wine. The wine that we're making up at Trinidad Napa Valley, it's just grapes. We're not adding a whole lot. We're trying to show that sense of place. Well, when you're trying to make wine on a larger scale, you might have to beef it up a little bit with other products along the way. All right, so obviously we are in California right now. California produces quite a bit of wine. How much wine do you think California produces for the whole country? What percentage is made right here in California? 70? We've got 90% of the wine for the whole country. How much would you guys guess comes from Napa Valley? 4% of California's wine is made in Napa Valley. So it's pretty darn small. Again, you have lower yields in Napa. But regardless, there are wine regions all over the world. And so we choose to plant grapes in what we call the temperate zone. All right? So you can see the highlighted area here above and below the equator. And it's anywhere from 30 to 50 degrees latitude. And so this is the prime area for growing grapes. And as you can see, California, pretty much the entire U.S., is right here in the temperate zone. But globally, there are over 20 million acres planted to grapes. Quite a bit. And produces about 70 million tons of fruit. And about 70% of these vines are for wine production. So the rest would be, of course, for grape juice, table grapes, raisins. But about 70% of that's going into wine production. So if you hear somebody talking about wines from the New World, we're talking about us here in the U.S. We are the New World. 88%, 90, close enough. But we also have countries like Australia, New Zealand, South America, and South Africa. So these are all really well-known wine regions. And then in the Old World, this is going to be mainly Europe. Of course, places like France and Italy, they've been making wine for thousands of years. And so these are going to be our Old World wine regions.
All right. And like Patty was saying, you make great wine from great grapes. You never make great wine from bad grapes. So it all really starts in the vineyard. And of course, the vine itself, all the wines that we enjoy, all the wines we enjoy, most commonly, Sauvignon Blanc, Sauvignon, Loire, and so forth, originally come from Europe, the genus and species of Vitis vinifera. And so now, can you make wine from other grapevines? Absolutely, you can. Has anybody had any Native American wines before? Concord, or Niagara, Indiana, Norton, anything like that? And like from Missouri, from areas like the central part and on the East Coast, they do make wine out of Native American varietals and also hybrid enjoy, the wines we really think of originally came from Europe. And Vitis vinifera, which is a species, of course. And a grapevine is really a hardy plant. Once it gets established, it's pretty darn hardy. It can last for a long period of time, just like the ones at the deeper range. Some of these vines are planted with Abraham Lincoln's president, they're still producing to this day. In fact, I had the opportunity to go to Spain a couple of weeks ago, and there's some really old vines. I mean, 100, 150 or more years old. So once a vine is established, it's a very hardy plant. Of course, for wine, if you do grow table grapes or grape juice, you want a lot of crop. You want those grapes to be nice and big and juicy. But for wine, of course, you don't know this. Poor soil is often the best. You want the vine to struggle a little bit, and when the vine does struggle, of course, the nutrients that go up through the vine, the vascular system of the vine, goes to the grapes, and just if a little bit goes, and the grapes get smaller, they stay small. They stay small, they stay very concentrated. In fact, what's the smallest grape? Of all the wine grapes, I think I'm going to be accurate, of all the wine grapes, what is the smallest berry? Cabernet Sauvignon. If you ever see Cabernet Sauvignon, especially in Napa Valley, they're smaller than blueberries. In fact, blueberries are like twice the size of little bitty Cabernet Sauvignon. It has what we call a high pulp ratio. And Cabernet Sauvignon is often called the winemaker's dream, because winemakers love that. A little bit of juice, but really concentrated. But the accountant's nightmare, the winemaker's dream, the accountant's nightmare. The accountant's saying, no, we need more juice, we need more juice, we need more bigger vines, bigger berries. So you want higher concentrations, smaller berries, of course, poor soils to do that. Relatively poor soils, of course. Right. On average, how many pounds of grapes come from one vine? Now, on average. I'll take a guess. About 20 to 30 pounds. Now, Napa Valley, it's a lot lower. Actually, it can be a lot lower than that, maybe 10 pounds, maybe 5 pounds in some cases. Okay, how many pounds of grapes does it take to make one bottle of wine? Actually, Bob Tucaro asked me that question many years ago. I don't know, I never thought about it. Just out of the blue, like I said, Bob loves that question. Okay. So, how many pounds of grapes does it take to make one bottle of wine? 750 billion. What? Half a pound? About 2.8 pounds. About 2.8 pounds. Yeah, that's close. Now, the anatomy of a grape, in case you're wondering. And of course, I mean, when we think about a grape, and it's just human nature, it's like, oh, it's just a grape. But as we stop and think about it, anything from nature that's been, survived for, thousands and millions of years, it's really a miracle. And so you have the pulp, of course, you have the bloom, and you have the natural yeast, and this is the protecting of the grape as well from sun damage and everything else. The skins, of course, this is really a healthy component. This is where all the resveratrol, all the phenolic characters are. Heart-healthy compounds. The stalk, of course, is sometimes used in winemaking to help build the structure, and also the pips can be used in winemaking to give structure as well. When you think about this, now, why does the grape get sweet? Why does the grape get sweet? Because every organism, let's get kind of deep. Every organism wants to reproduce, of course. To reproduce, keep the species going. So a grape gets sweet, and the seeds get nice and ripe, ready for planting. They start to dry out a little bit, get ready for planting. Same time, the pulp gets really sweet. Well, if you have a really sweet grape, what does it attract? Birds. Birds come by, they eat the grapes, they spread it around into another area. Of course, then it grows a grapevine somewhere else. So it's really, as simple as it is a miracle as it is. It really is when you think about it. So, the growing cycle, of course, we have bud break. When the temperature in the soil and the outside temperature reaches about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, average 50 degrees, the vine wakes up. And when it wakes up, a vine is just a vascular system, when you think about it. It's just a vascular system. If you look at it on the microscope, you cut a vine, maybe some of you all know, you cut a vine, you look at it, you can see like little holes. It's a vascular system. And it pumps water and nutrients throughout the vine, all the way to the leaves. It's the berries and the leaves, and so forth. So this happens, beginning with bud break. Okay, the growing, the pumping of the water, then it gets into bud break. You have flowering about 40 to 80 days after bud break, and you see the little blossoms, and grapes are self-pollinating. And how lucky is that? Because we don't need bees. We don't need bees to pollinate grapes. And you have these, if you ever look at it under a microscope, you have these like little fingers, little pollen then you have what they call the ovum, the egg in the center that becomes a berry. And just with the wind, it pollinates that berry, it self-pollinates. It's, once again, a miracle of nature. Then you have berry set, of course. You have a beautiful berry set. All the berries are nice and set on the cluster. And then you have veraison, which is actually the color, the maturing of the berry, the softening of the berry, the ripening of the berry, and the color change, development of the phenolics in the berries. And these are just some beautiful pictures. This is a picture of Trinchero Napa Valley right here, a winery. You can see how small of an operation. And we often say it's really true. I know it sounds kind of corny and kind of hokey about it, but our winemakers are given everything they need, really everything they need. Our department, we had the opportunity to build an education program. I don't know if you've ever seen Trinchero Napa Valley. We have a culinary center there. We see about 10,000 trade professionals from all over the world, and we provide lunches, dinners, education programs. We showcase all of our wines, our many wines there, and our spirits. And so we often say, if you do a bad job for the Trincheros, I have a lot of explaining to do. Because they give us everything we need to do our jobs incredible, including our winemakers, the best of the best equipment you can possibly imagine. In fact, even Bob and Roger, when we started with Trinchero, you have to understand, it took a lot for them. In fact, when their mother passed away, Mary passed away, that was when they really said, it's time to put the family name back on the bottle. Because they even had Sutter Home, they had Trinchero Vermouth, a little bit. But that's the only time they ever put their name on the bottle. But then in 1995, the vintage 1995, released later on, of course, the Cabernet. It was 97, something like that. And they said, now is the time to honor our family, honor our parents. And we're going to put our name on a bottle of wine, the Trinchero name on the bottle of wine. And they told our winemakers, one thing to think about, one thing only, money's no object. Just make sure you make the best bottle of wine possibly made. We put our parents' name on it. And it took a lot for them to do that. In fact, I remember we changed the name of the company. I used to go to distributors, I still do quite a bit. And I remember we changed the name of the company from Sutter Home to Trinchero Family Estates. Because, people didn't know the Trinchero family. They didn't know, they had no idea. I remember walking into distributorships, people saying, oh, who's this Trinchero family? They bought Sutter Home. Sutter Home was just sold. I said, no, back in the 1940s. That's how humble the Trincheros have been over the years. People didn't even know who they were. Terroir, they're coming together of climate, landscape, and soil, of course, and like I said, you can grow a grapevine anywhere. Grapevine's hardy. In fact, you can take a cutting, stick it in the mud just about anywhere in the world. It'll probably grow, it'll probably root. But it's all about the sense of place and the perfect terroir, the climate, the soil, the landscape. And of course, terroir dictates the great variety. We often say in Napa Valley, it's not too many places in the world. I don't think of any place in the world. Oakville, Rutherford, St. Helena. What's the most planted wine grape there? Cabernet Sauvignon. As a crow flies, you're in Carneros, about maybe 5-6 miles or so in Carneros. What's the most planted wine grape in Carneros? Chardonnay and Pinot Noir at a world-class level. So amazing to have that kind of diversity of terroir in such a small place in Napa Valley. So terroir dictates all of this, all of your decisions. Super. Hey.
All right. So now that we have an idea of what goes on in the vineyard, let's see what happens when the grapes are at the winery, right? So a few of you guys probably already know this in and out, but we're going to talk about white wine and then red wine. But the main difference between the two is going to be the skins, right? For white wine, we're pretty much done with the skins right after we press the grapes. Red wine, like we said earlier, all the color, the aroma, the flavor, the tannins, that all comes from the skins. So you can look at these diagrams here and kind of see how it's done. So of course, the grape clusters come in and we're going to crush and de-stem them. This is going to be a bladder press right here, and we'll show you guys some other pictures of those here in a minute. But then we'll put the juice right into tanks, let the solids settle out, and then add the yeast, fermentation occurs, and then filter in the bottle. So again, pretty straightforward. Now for the red wine, I always think these pictures are just kind of funny. I don't really know where they came from.
I forgot a long time.
Yeah, these are like, back in like, I don't even know, the 1600s here or something with this fancy equipment. But anyway, you'll have initially probably some sorting going on. So, if there's anything undesirable in the grapes, we'll take that out. And we'll de-stem a lot of times. Sometimes winemakers will choose to leave the stems in their during fermentation. But oftentimes they'll de-stem. And then the entire grapes will go right into the fermenter, into the tank. So you'll leave the skins for the entire time, entire duration of fermentation. And sometimes you'll leave them in there for an extended maceration, an extended time on the skins. Up at Trinidad Napa Valley, the grapes are in there with the skins, so the skins in the wine and everything for about a month. So it's a long time. So you're getting all that extraction out. And then it may go into barrels. Like Barry said earlier, only about 10% of all wine actually is aged in oak barrels. One of the reasons for that is oak barrels are not cheap. So not all wine will be aged in there. But then again, oftentimes will be aged in the bottle as well for red wine. And so it might be, 5 years before that wine is actually hitting the market. Or you never know. I mean, you can be drinking wine that's decades old and it's still alive. So crushing and destemming. These are just some images which you can kind of see. A lot of times, like this one here on the bottom corner, whole clusters would go into there, and those paddles get in between the grapes and the stems and just gently pop it off. They just turn around, and then the individual grapes will fall into these little holes in that stainless steel barrel and then fall out. So that's how you get the stems out of there, which I think is pretty fascinating. And then fermentation vessels. So you can use stainless steel, you can use concrete, you can use oak. Stainless steel is typically the easiest way to go about it. It's very neutral. It's not going to impart anything into the wine, and it's easy to clean. And we can easily control the temperature of these tanks as well. So you'll see a lot more stainless steel these days, but sometimes oak is used as well. And this is the pressing. So kind of mentioned the ladder presses earlier. So these are pictures of a ladder press. So it's this giant cylinder. It's very large. And on the inside, just on the outside, or just right on the inside here, there's going to be a big old balloon, pretty much. And it's going to inflate, and it's going to push these whole grape clusters up against a screen that is also inside this like cylinder here. And so it's going to push the grapes up against the screen just gently. So it's not going to crush the seeds inside. Just going to let all that free-run juice go. And then that juice will flow out beneath. You have to be really careful. You don't want to break the seeds open, because if you do that, you'll get some bitter or astringent notes that we typically don't want. So sometimes it can take hours for these giant presses to crush all the grapes, because there's so many grapes in there at once. And so after the grapes have been pressed, we have what we call pumice. So I don't think you guys ever go to the production side, but they have like mountains of this pumice here. And most of the time we'll send that off to be composted. But so that's the skins or the stems, seeds that we're not using anymore. And a different type of press here. This is called a basket press. And this is what we use up at Trincaro for our skins that have been sitting in the red tanks for the whole month during the fermentation and maceration process. Then we'll put them all into a press like this, and it's called a basket press. It kind of looks like a basket there. And afterwards, it's very condensed, and all the moisture has been sucked out, and that's often referred to as the cake, because it doesn't look like cake. Okay, so it's press. And then again, aging. So here, oftentimes aged in barrels. And there's two main types of barrels that you're going to see for wine production, wine aging. That's going to be French and American oak, right? French oak barrels, how much do you think that typically goes for? A brand new barrel? Any idea? 600? Yeah? I would hope to find one for 600. It's actually going to be a little bit higher than that. Yeah, about $1,000 for a new French oak barrel. American oak is more around 600 or so. So $1,000. It's a lot of money. But yeah, so one of the reasons why is French oak barrels can only come from France, you can imagine, and they're from certain forests that the government has designated for French barrel production. So these trees are harvested, and in order for a tree to harvest, its growing cycle is about 80 to 120 years, and then it's harvested, and one tree can only make about 2 barrels of wine. So this one tree, took 80 to 100 years, for it to harvest. Then you're going to harvest it, you're going to cut it into all these staves, you're going to let it sit outside in weather for at least 3 years before you can even use that wood to make 2 barrels. So, again, they're not cheap, but they can do wonders for wine. And so, typically, when we talk to winemakers, they'll say that the oak aging in the barrel should kind of be like a frame, right? So think of like a beautiful portrait. You want the portrait to be the one, the grape shining through. But the oak is just going to enhance that. want some big gaudy frame, and you can't even really, focus on the image there. So it's just to kind of enhance that. So French oak will typically give you baking spices and a little bit more mellow than American oak. American oak is a little bit more like a punch in the face. You kind of you smell it, and you know it's American oak. Think of like coconut, dill, or vanilla. So yeah, so that's.
Does anybody know? I'll ask you a question. Who produces more oak barrels, United States or France? What do you think? United States, but not. I mean, for wine, but not so much for wine. For what? Bourbon, whiskey. Yeah, we produce a lot of oak barrels in the United States. So when you think about, like Maddie was saying, the components of aroma characteristics of American oak. Anybody drink bourbon in here? Yeah. So what does bourbon smell like? Sweet vanilla, caramel. So those are the things that would lend to the wine. And why is France so well known historically and still to this day for the majority of oak barrels? Now, of course, oak from France, amazing quality of oak. But why did they produce so many oak barrels? It goes back hundreds and hundreds of years ago. France had one of the largest navies in the world. And many, many years ago, hundreds of years ago, what were the ships built out of? Out of wood. So in the center of France, they have all these forests, and of course they grew the oak trees. If you ever see an oak forest where they make barrels, where they make the staves, the oak trees go straight up. They're planted very close together. It's unbelievable to see these forests. And that's how they planted them. So over a period of time, of course, ships were built out of steel. So wooden ships became obsolete. France had all these trees. So a business, being, innovative, they said, okay, we need to figure out what to do with all these oak barrels. Let's start making oak trees. Let's make barrels out of them. So that's one of the reasons why France is so well known for oak barrels, because it was originally for shipbuilding. Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. Yeah, no, it's great.
I just made that up.
Yeah. It works. But generally, one thing that I think is kind of fun about the winemaking process is that it's ever continuing, ever changing, and there's always something to look forward to. So right now, we're kind of in this cross between finishing up harvest and still continuing winemaking. So I think at least Napa Valley, we're about 75% of the way through harvest season. I'm sure it's pretty similar for us here as well. But yeah, so I mean, typically, the winter time, the vines are dormant. It's a little bit of a calm time for us here, but obviously, for those who work in bottling, I'm sure it's busy as ever. But then, of course, you have bud break into spring, and then the growing season all throughout the summer. All right.
And one of the things that I learned early on was that learning about wine can be very intimidating, extremely intimidating. So we want to make sure that people learn a lot about wine. We want you to have a good time. If you're having a good time, chances are you're going to retain a lot of the things. And like some of the questions, like the little game show we just played for y'all, those are the most important things we want you to really take away from this presentation. Y'all did great, by the way. You really did. So now this one, Master Wine Royalty and Royal Wheel of Fortune. We talked about this, a lot of this already, so we can kind of breeze through it and get right to the game itself. And this is your,
Sure.
Yeah, because you know this.
Well, has anybody ever seen the movie Psalm on Netflix? Anybody heard of it?
Yeah.
A couple of you guys? Okay. Well, if not, if you have Netflix, I think it's a fun movie to go watch. Might just be at the wine geek and be coming out. But regardless, it is just a documentary about these four men who are trying to become a master sommelier. So a master sommelier, for those of you who do not know, it's a crazy certification. There are less than 300 in the world. And in order to pass this, you have to take a very rigorous theory portion of the exam. There is a service portion, and there's also blind tasting. So that's a big portion of this movie is about blind tasting. And these three guys are showcased in there, and they are amazing. And honestly, just watching them and seeing everything they're getting out of a glass of wine, I think is pretty remarkable. And that just goes to show, I mean, I'm doing different wine studies as well. I'm in a couple of different tasting groups. And the whole idea behind blind tasting is all about what you smell. And they say 90% of what you perceive in a glass of wine is based on your sense of smell. So pretty much before you even taste the wine, you should already have an idea of what the wine is, just because you're getting all these different aromas. And these are obviously just different write-ups about different wines that we produced. And so whether it has hints of lemongrass or has maybe a little bit of minerality. Obviously, you guys all know about wine. You know that wine is just from grapes. But Barry and I both have had interactions with guests that are very into the wine, world of wine. And canna, the best berry. So when do you add all the ingredients? Because people think that, oh, well, they must add lemongrass to this. Maybe they put have some interaction with some minerals or whatever it is. But again, it's just grapes. And that's one of the fun things about wine is that there are so many different styles and so much you can get from a glass of wine. So we've already kind of gone over the physiology of smell. Barry kind of talked about that, but it's really it's your olfactory epithelium, and these are the hair-like nerve endings that are going to capture these aromas and really transmit it to your brain and tell you what it is that you're smelling. And one thing to note with this too is there's a very strong correlation between your memory and your sense of smell too. So that's why it's kind of fun to do this next game or with other people, because they'll all pick up on different things. And we're going to give you guys little vials of different aromas that people often find in wine, and you're going to have to try to guess what it is. And it's a lot harder to say that this smells like an apple when you're not looking at an apple, right? And so a lot of it's going to go back to your memory. And you can have pleasant associations with aromas. You can have some unpleasant associations. So for me, I am born and raised in Kansas City, and it is nice and hot and humid in the summertime there. And so for me, for whatever reason, whenever I smell gasoline, I just think of back to when I was in middle school, and I remember like a nice hot summer day, my dad telling me that it's time to go mow the lawn, and it was the last thing that I wanted to do because, of course, it's so hot, gross, and I'm just, I smell that gasoline. So I may not have the most pleasant association with gasoline. However, my grandma had a wonderful rose garden outside her house, and every time that I'd go visit her, there was just roses everywhere. So I love the smell of roses. One of the lady I used to work with really closely, she absolutely hated the smell of roses because they were at one of her family members' funerals. So just, interesting how that works out. You can all pick up on certain things. So, kind of went over this as well here as well. So, but really, 90% of what you perceive in the glass is based on your sense of smell, and all the different aromas that we're smelling are called esters. So, esters are these chemical compounds that are present in grapes. That's what Mary was talking about swirling your glass. We're volatilizing the esters or all the aromas. So, we have broken this down into 3 different types of aromas. All right, we have primary, secondary, and tertiary. All right. So, so primary aromas. Primary aromas are coming from the grape itself. Okay. So these are coming from the grape or the terroir. This is what's going to make Sauvignon Blanc very different from Chardonnay, which is very different from Pinot Grigio. Right? Each grape has inherent characteristics itself. But also the terroir. So the terroir is going to be the whole environment in which the grapes are grown. So, here in Lodi, you guys grow some like what Zinfandel, the grape out here too, right? So Zinfandel out here is going to be very different than it is in Dry Creek, which is in Sonoma County, which is going to be very different from Amador County. All these different areas are going to be drastically different. It's the same grape, but it's going to have different qualities, and that is going to be terroir. So these are both going to be primary aromas. Now, secondary aromas. Secondary aromas are aromas that you're going to get through the winemaking process. So once the grapes have arrived at the winery, these are different practices that we're going to do, or the winemaker is going to choose to do, and they're going to impart aromas into your wine. So we talked about barrel use. If the winemaker decides to ferment in barrels or age in barrels, you'll get some aromas from that for sure. Okay, we talked about the difference between French and American oak. Another one is malolactic fermentation. Have you guys heard of that before? Yeah? So think about like a green apple. Think about very tart. That's malic acid. All right? So all grapes have malic acid already prevalent in that. But through malolactic fermentation, all of malic acid will get converted into lactic acid, which is in what? Butter or cream. So that's why people might say, oh, the Chardonnay is buttery. There's literally Chardonnays that are called butter. And so that is what malolactic fermentation is. And a lot of white wines don't go through that, but one like Chardonnay definitely does. Sur-lie aging. You guys ever heard of sur-lie? So sur-lie means aging on the lees. And lees are the dead yeast cells that fall out of wine fermentation. So winemaker can choose to rack those leaves off right off the bat, or they can choose to leave it in there. And because it's yeast, it's going to give it a nice creamy or yeasty or bread dough type of aroma. One wine that I think of when I think of Sur Lie is champagne. So champagne is actually aged on the leaves. It's aged Sur Lie, and if you smell a nice bottle of champagne, it's going to have that kind of bread doughy like quality to it. Finally, we have carbonic maceration, and this is going to be a style of wine. You'll see a lot of it in a region in France called Beaujolais. But regardless, what carbonic maceration is pretty much the grapes are going to ferment whole. So you're going to put whole clusters of grapes in a tank, and then because of the CO2 that's released through fermentation, the grapes will literally just burst open, and you're going to get a lot of really bright fruit aromas from that. You can say like bubblegum or banana peel, and they're like super fruity. It's more like a fruit roll-up or something when you have that. All right, and off aromas. These are also kind of included in secondary aromas, and these are ones that we typically do not want in wine. So maybe the winery was not super clean, or there was a flaw along the way. But first and foremost, we have TCA, or a corked wine. Probably a lot of you guys have experienced a corked wine. At some point in time, it's kind of inevitable if you drink a lot of wine. And this is really just coming from a cork itself. So TCA is inherent in the corks, and it's gone down considerably over the last couple decades, but it is still there. And so this bacteria will just ruin the entire wine if it has the TCA in there. And it's actually, there's a little aroma for it, and I guarantee you, the second it's open, this whole room is going to smell like this. So it's good to know what it smells like, though, because that goes with to say with a lot of these here, because if you open one bottle of wine and you get the cork's aroma, that one bottle is flawed, but the rest of the piece could be just fine. But it's important that you're able to know that not all wine is going to taste like that or smell like that. I can tell you firsthand, my parents are not very educated on wine, they don't know a whole lot about it, and there's been wine that I've seen them drink half a bottle of, and I try to sip and it's corked, and they're like, it's okay, I'm not going to get this again. But I realized, well, that's a flawed wine, and if you ever get that, you can easily send it back at a restaurant, take it back to the store, and they should gladly change that for you. So it's just good to know, and just become educated on that. But there's other things like acetic acid or ethyl acetate, so kind of like a vinegary nail polish remover. Again, things you do not want to smell in your wine. Maybe they use too much sulfur, like a mercaptan smeller. It's like rotten eggs. You ever get that one? Honestly, just swirl it around a whole bunch, maybe decant it. Sometimes that can blow right off. But then there's a rotten egg or yeah, just give it, honestly, it sounds weird, but give it some time. And that goes to say with all these aromas in this box, too. You don't want to get them on you. Some of them might smell nice, and you might feel like perfume. But some of them, there is a rotten egg one, and that's one that I will test these periodically to make sure they still smell good. And I got that one on my nose once, and it was the entire day I was getting wafts of that, so not a good one. But finally, we have Brettanomyces, and some people call this Brett. This is something, when I think of Brett, I think of some kind of stinky French wines. Wineries in France or Italy, they can kind of get away with some Brett, and it's really just kind of, there's like maybe some funk going on in their winery, and they can get away with that because these wines are old world, they have that old style. If there's Brett in a wine made from Napa or California, chances are they're not going to get away with that too easily. So it can smell like horse, like a barnyard. Some people say it smells like a box Band-Aid when you first open that up. So that is what Brett is. So with that being said, yeah?
Just really quick, I have to say, when we first started doing this seminar, like 20 plus years ago, some of these, 20 plus years ago, I know a lot of y'all are really young in this room, but 20 years ago, it was quite a bit of bad wine out there in the market, from certain parts of the world, and it's like, oh my God. So you probably never, thank goodness you never had a wine that probably smelled like rotten eggs or like a rotten onion. But I can tell you that I have. a bottle of wine that I bought from the store at a relatively cheap price, say, oh, that's a good bottle of wine, it's a good price, I'll buy it. Oh, it's horrible. Now, thank goodness, within a short period of time, winemaking has come a long way. I mean, look at the facility that we have here. Look at y'all work, my God. So yeast, you really don't see them too much anymore. Like Maddie was saying, Brettanomyces, you know, you do see that a little bit. It's not an offensive odor, like barnyard or whatever. And a little bit actually has some complexity. What they actually, it was a French producer in Bordeaux, and I'll never forget. He's quoted, "I have beautiful filth in my winery," because he was proud of the yeast that the Brettanomyces had developed, and really was a hallmark of the style of the wines that he produced. So it doesn't have to be offensive, but a lot of these, you know, look at the place you work. I mean, you would never ever see that in a facility such as this. You really would. But the most horrible, the most heinous, the most hideous, of course, is cork. You don't see it as much as you used to. At one point in time, they said it was up to almost 8% of all the wine that was sold in the United States had some level of cork taint. Almost 8%. That is unbelievable. And but I think it's really reduced. So you don't see a lot of these anymore. You do see some TCA, of course, a little bit. Not as much, nearly as much as you used to. Winemakers come a long way.
Yeah, for sure. And also with that, I mean, you're seeing a lot of wineries, like look at New Zealand or Australia. It's hard to come by a wine that's actually has a cork in it. Most of that's all screw cap these days too. So that limits. You can still actually get a cork wine even with a screw cap, but chances are much smaller. All right. Well, finally, the third type of aroma. These are tertiary aromas. Okay. So this is pretty much as the wine is aging in the bottle. So this is over time how the aromas can change. So if you were to go and drink a 2015 Napa Cab, it's going to be really fruit forward. It's going to be kind of jammy almost. Well, if you have that same wine in 10, 15, 20 years, okay, all that fruit, some of it might be there. You're going to get a lot more of these kind of like earthy, maybe tobacco, cigar box type qualities that are going to shine through. Those are tertiary aromas. So the term tertiary aromas is actually synonymous with bouquet. So you kind of use that term, throw it around there, ask your friends. Bouquet, some people will use that to say all of the aromas within wines, like, oh, the bouquet on this wine is really bright red fruits. And that's more of a primary aroma, not as much bouquet. But regardless, those are the three types of aromas here. So we want to go through these grapes, or
You do. You can do it really quick.
Yeah.
Just really quick.
well, so we're going to talk about just some popular wine grapes. We'll touch on some of them and kind of the characteristics. So Chardonnay, it's the most popular white wine in the U.S. So a lot of ladies especially love their Chardonnay. A lot of people like the oak and the butter and come along with it. Sauvignon Blanc is another big one, and you're seeing more and more plantings of Sauvignon Blanc in California. And this one is going to be sometimes kind of green, grapefruit, it's a little grassy, but a lot of nice stone fruit as well. It's one of my favorites, especially on a nice hot day. Pinot Gris, or Pinot Grigio, it's the same grape, Pinot Grigio here in Italy. And this is going to be produced all throughout France, it's going to be in Italy, and there's some in here in California. There's also a lot in the Oregon up in the Willamette Valley. And this one is going to be, it's a pretty neutral grape overall. There's not a whole lot going on. It's very easy drinking. It's got nice acidity as well. And Riesling. Riesling is another one of my all-time favorites. It's going to be very popular in Germany. And there is some grown out here in California, some up in Washington State, and actually in New York, because it's a little bit cooler. So like this grape likes a nice cool climate. And not all Riesling is sweet. I think that's a perception that a lot of people think. And there's plenty of dry Rieslings out there. And sometimes sweetness helps because it is so high in acidity that sweetness kind of balances that a little bit. Some red grapes. Obviously, we talked a lot about Cabernet Sauvignon today. It's one of the most widely planted grapes in the world. And it makes some really nice wines. Again, because it makes it pretty easy on the winemaker there. So, because it has such great concentration within the grapes. Think about a lot of dark fruit notes when you're smelling the Cabernet Sauvignon. Merlot, it's kind of rough patch over the years. Has anybody ever seen the movie Sideways? Yeah, a couple of you guys? Remember the one little outburst that he had on Merlot? The main actor didn't like Merlot very much. And there was about a 30-second scene where he just was hating on Merlot. And it's been crazy, but it was true that sales just plummeted after that. And they're literally Merlot's just now starting to get come back. I think it came out when?
Oh, geez. 15 years ago?
Yeah, it was a long time ago. And Zinfandel. For a long time, we thought it was indigenous to California. Turns out it's not. But there used to be old Zinfandel vines all throughout the state. We still have quite a bit out here. But think of very fresh, very fruity. This is actually the wine that got me into red Zinfandel. I love red Zinfandel. I still like it. But it was that was like the aha moment I had. That. And obviously, white Zinfandel we are very familiar with. And Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir is another one of my favorites here, just because it's very light, it's very easy drinking. It's a thin-skinned grape, so there's not a whole lot of tannins with that. Very delicate, very pretty wines. I probably would go home and just pour myself a glass of Napa Cab on its own because it's really big, it's really bold, it's just going to dry your mouth out. But something like a Pinot Noir, you can definitely drink it in cocktail if you'd like to. So, with that being